Welcome, everyone. This is a talk on Jupiter, and I'll be focusing on the dichotomy, the relationship between what we believe and what we know. When I was sort of holding space for a topic that felt inspiring to me, this came through. And it makes sense. This is a good time to speak about this. Jupiter is retrograde in Sagittarius, and it's building momentum. So it's kind of like, really, really growing and kind of deepening in its retrograde phase. And when Jupiter goes retrograde, especially in Sagittarius, that's a time where we might find ourselves confronted relative to what we think is happening, our existing beliefs, our cosmology, our sense of where's our path leading us, because Jupiter is always about the path. It's always about this sense of there's something more. We're learning more, we're discovering more, the truth is ever unfolding, and we're on this pilgrimage to expand our horizons. We experience that. Every one of us has that sense that there's an unfolding realization happening here in this life. And when Jupiter goes retrograde, there can actually be a lot of confrontation and confusion that occurs relative to our existing sense of direction, where we think we're going, being confronted with what's actually happening. And people don't actually speak about trauma when it comes to Jupiter very much, but there's actual trauma there. When we have a belief structure, and this is not necessarily like a Neptune where we put meaning and value in life, but Jupiter, we have an interpretation of reality. We have a sense of, okay, I understand what's going on. I had these dreams, I'm witnessing these things. This is my cosmological awareness of things. This is either the religion I believe in. This is my cosmological picture of my relationship with Source and what's happening, what's unfolding here. We often think we just have it all figured out. And there can actually be trauma. It's a cosmological, it's like a conceptual trauma. What's the right word? Existential trauma, where the foundation of our belief constructs are interrupted. And what we have to do with that, and this is really the Jupiter retrograde journey, is we need to allow ourselves to return to the path. And with Jupiter, always there's the invitation for an underlying sense of receptivity to be a good traveler. And the good traveler has no fixed plans, isn't intent upon arrival, and isn't convinced, I'm going here, and this is what I'm doing. And I've shared this before. One of my teachers, whose name I'm spacing out on right now, shared beautifully once that when you're getting on a plane to Florida, you're not getting on a plane to Florida, you're buying the ticket. And you're grabbing your bags and you're walking to the bathroom, and then you're getting on the plane. And we often have just sort of a sense of like, yeah, this is the story. This is what I'm doing. This is my story of my life and what's happening. But when we hold that, we so often actually alienate ourselves from what's actually happening, the actual story being written, what's actually unfolding in our lives. And we put value and give a whole lot of meaning and purpose to these ideas of an end game, this idea of the end result, this idea of a destination. And it's not really accurate at all. There's only the journey in this life. So that's where I feel this is a really good time to talk about this archetype. And there's something about Jupiter for all of us where we can't free ourselves from a belief system. That's what's really interesting about this. Like you ask someone like, so what are your beliefs? No matter what they say, they're going to reveal their cosmological outlook on life. But you can't not have a cosmological outlook. You can't not have a perspective. Even if you say, I don't really have any beliefs, like there's a lot just in that. So we're all experiencing that. We all have, by a natural function of being human, of existing here, a impulse, an orientation to interpret reality, to integrate and internalize and come to understand the meaning and create sense out of all of this. Relative to the need for security, a lot of the times our impulse to understand and make sense out of everything ends up being a destination and a point of arrival. And wherever we have Jupiter in our own charts is we're on the one hand, we're learning to have a direct experience of the truth. And we have to have a way of understanding and integrating it so that we can make it livable, so we can access it, we can apply it. But if it becomes so fixed, if we don't really allow ourselves to continue learning, and if we don't recognize the inherent subjectivity of our existing understanding, we're going to be limited, and we won't really allow life to guide us and teach us. So I was writing out a whole bunch of really great notes here, and I'll show you a snapshot of my journal if you can see it. It's a mess because this is what happens when you have Jupiter, which is, insight, conjunct Neptune, which is channel, source, and Mercury, which is the actual articulation of words and ideas that can be communicated, is you end up writing your dreams on the same page where you wrote your insights the night before, and then you can't make any of it out. So as per Neptune, which is generally how I roll, I'm just going to roll with it. I want to start off this talk just by giving some examples of something that we can all relate to, and just to keep ourselves grounded in the idea and the notion that at the core of it, Jupiter is our expanding experience of life. It's how we are all growing to encompass and apprehend and internalize more and more and more of the truth, which implies an underlying quality of openness and receptivity to what's true, what's actually happening. So something we can all relate to, and I'm going to give a specific example of this, but I'm sure we can find this in all of our lives. Very, very often, we have this relationship to the teacher figure or the guru figure or the plant teacher figure or archetype, where how they relate to us, how they speak to us, the information or insight that we receive from them becomes interpreted and internalized through our own existing self-concept, our existing self-concept. For example, I have many friends, including myself, that have done a lot of work with plant medicines, and where the spirits of the plants are here to help us and guide us on our path journey and help us unravel more of the truth within ourselves. And something I often observe is people will project onto these medicines, onto these plant spirits, human qualities. For example, I've learned something, and I've learned this when I've worked with plant medicine. I've learned this when I work with myself in meditation. I've learned this about life. So an example of this is I'm sitting in a ceremony, and I've noticed when I'm in a relaxed and allowing state of mind, there's this impersonal life force energy that opens, and I can almost feel as if something is interacting with my system, and it has its own intelligence. And on one level of perspective, it feels like, yeah, there's something is doing something to me, and is cleaning me out, is healing me, is doing something to me. And I've observed that when I become fascinated with the process, when I start trying to control it or I think about it, it stops or it goes away. Similarly, with meditation, we've all had different experiences along our journey where maybe we've had an awakening experience, something where we have stepped aside from the otherwise mundane normalcy of day-to-day life, and we access something that's more fundamentally true and eternal. But then it went away. We often have that notion of, I want to get back there, or this experience that I had, it's gone, and I want to somehow get back to it. In meditation, we can have this experience of something opening up, something awakening, and the mind kicks in, and now it's gone. It's very easy to interpret, and I often observe people interpreting these things as, for example, in ceremony, oh, well, she doesn't like it, she being the plant spirit. She doesn't like it when I think, so she leaves when I start trying to think and control. But she likes it when I open up and I surrender. It's not wrong, it's just not true. Right? Another story is I was being rewarded because I let go and I trusted. Or I was being taught a lesson to not always control my thoughts. Or I was suffering big time, and that was to teach me a lesson that I don't have to try to understand everything. That's not necessarily wrong, but it's definitely not true either. It's so common that we project upon the reality of things that are happening a very specific story that sort of encapsulates and recognizes the reality of truth, but it also unintentionally limits it because there's a very specific interpretation being projected outward. In our own meditation, when we come into stillness, we so often have this idea that we need to do something right. I mean, pretty much, you don't have to raise your hand, but is everyone here 100% of the time getting the results that they're seeking on their spiritual practices? And so often we're not. Oftentimes we are not. Most people do not. And it's not because of the practice, it's because of the way that we are in relationship to the practice. Same thing with the relationship. There's something about reality, human beings, nature. When we are in a spaciousness of being, what is true just kind of happens on its own. And when we're not in that spaciousness, it's not like what's true isn't happening, but there isn't space for its blossoming. We can find that with a partner. And we can say, well, you don't like me, right? You don't ever open up to me. You don't initiate. But there's a fundamental truth in all of our relationships that everything is in a dance with our interior consciousness. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm speaking about these dynamics, but I'm offering a principle, one that's not free from interpretation or my own subjectivity, but what I'm attempting to do is to offer a basic principle that is impersonal, that's free from punishment, reward, blame, causality, and just reflecting, how does life work? What's fundamentally true about reality? When we orient anything in that way, we become more curious about what's actually true. But when we settle upon, well, she didn't like me, or I'm being punished, or that's not how it works, how do I make it work? Then we're holding a very specific story and we're trying to make life fit into our own story. Our relationship to the spiritual path, always 100% in our relationship to everything in life, is the thing that we are relating to. That's sort of like this not so secret secret, that there aren't diseases or sicknesses or problems. Of course there are, and it would be wrong for me to attest that in the wrong kind of context or environment. But when we look at everything, at the heart of everything is relationship. At the heart of everything is this present moment. And so often we alienate ourselves from what's actually happening right now because we are quick to give it a story, to give it an answer, to fill in that empty space with context. Arwen, I think everyone else could hear me. Can everyone else hear me? I'm assuming you can, otherwise you're just watching my face. I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me. Wilderness, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Oh, I don't think Wilderness can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Good. Earlier today, I met a friend of mine at an acai bowl cafe, and I parked. I was thinking it was going to be a quick visit, that we're just going to kind of get the food and get out. So I parked in a gas station, but there's this big sign that said, "Only park here." Yeah, Linda would have told me if she couldn't hear me. It's true. Only park here if you're actually going to the gas station. If you're illegally parking here, you'll be towed. So I'm thinking, well, I'm just here for a moment. No one's going to know that I'm not at the gas station. So I go into this cafe and we're actually sitting down and eating and we're talking. And it's like interesting because on the surface, I'm talking, I'm speaking words and everything's authentic. And I'm even eliciting some emotion, sharing my life, feeling her. She's talking about her journey. All the while, there's a part of my consciousness, and this is just one way of describing it, that's at that gas station thinking, I'm here longer than I thought. I feel like I should move my van. And for a while, I was struggling with authenticity. And authenticity here was, there was something in me that was calling my attention in the present moment. But I was trying to convince myself to not be concerned with it until I just kind of dropped into it. And I'm like, you know what? I noticed myself worrying about my van. I parked here and I'm going to actually change my parking spot. And I did. By addressing that, I was able to return to my friend, and then there was nothing else on my mind. I wasn't concerned with anything else. And there's a great peace and like, oh, this is what it's like to be fully present right here, right now. So often when we enter into our life experiences, we're already coming into it with a whole bunch of other truths, emotions, sensations, desires, needs that are actually present right here, right now. And it's a shame, or it's just unfortunate in my view, but of course it's just how it is, that in so many spiritual practices and what we're often taught by many teachers and just society in general, we're not given adequate validation and permission to actually give attention to what's actually happening right now. We're sitting in ceremony and the goddess is awakening and arising inside of us, and it's amazing, and we can feel like she's doing all these things, and then we start thinking and she goes away. That moment where we say, oh, I lost it, or we had a spiritual experience once in our life and it was like 5 years ago and we haven't been able to get it back. That moment right there where we are saying, I lost something or I want to get it back somewhere, that's where we're not being honest with ourselves. It is so easy to be dishonest with ourselves. And that's what Jupiter really points to. It eludes us. When we're giving a dialogue about our life to ourselves, to someone else, to the infinite void of the present moment, and we're holding a particular way of thinking about it. And that particular way of thinking isn't actually true for us. We're not being honest with ourselves. And it often feels like it's true for us. Like, what do you mean? I wish I can get that back. I wish I didn't do this. Now I'm here. There's something about that vibration that is settling into a story about our life. What's actually true might be the energy of, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling regret. I'm feeling lostness. I'm feeling remorse. I feel this empty void. And the moment always, no matter where, that we acknowledge what's actually here right now, one, we're not talking a story about it. When we tell a story about something, it becomes edict, it becomes canonized. We can acknowledge this is what's happening right now, but we end up dropping into a silence naturally. Whenever the present moment is acknowledged, it can just sort of rise and then return. And the only natural impulse, effortlessly, is being with it. We return to the blossoming sense of this journey is going and going and going. There's something more. There's this next moment. I'm right here on my path. Whenever we allow ourselves to return where we actually are. I've often given this analogy because I'm a Sag, so I do this a lot, especially in the third house, which is cars or driving. Driving down the road and I'm going where I think I'm supposed to go. And I start thinking, I think I might be going in the wrong direction. But no, this is the right direction. And at a certain point, I'm like genuinely not certain if I'm going in the right direction. So my first impulse is to try to prove to myself that I'm going in the right direction. Like, okay, well, the sun's over there and the trees are over here, and it feels like this is the direction I'm supposed to be going. But then I'll notice after some time, a few minutes later, I still notice some doubt. And eventually, I'll pull over and I'll do what I need to do to find out decisively if I'm going in the right direction. And whether I am or whether I'm not, the moment I actually meet myself where I am, and I'm no longer just trying to like get a quick answer, like, let me see, no, I'm definitely going the right direction, or no, you're definitely not going to leave me, or no, I'm definitely on the right spiritual path, or no, I'm doing it right. Okay, good. Like, we do that. We're just like grabbing for something that will validate that everything's okay. At the core, the insecurity in Jupiter is that I'm not right. I have it all wrong. And if I have it all wrong, that means I'm doing it wrong. That means I am wrong. If I have it all wrong, that means I'm totally missing the mark. Like more existentially, it points to a deeper sense of alienation from creator, from source, from love, from truth. It's like there's something fundamentally flawed. And I want to just point out in this chart here, let me share my screen. Here we have Jupiter, Sagittarius, ninth house. Ignore the red for this moment. I actually want to point something else out. But just note, Jupiter squares Virgo. And, Sagittarius, which Jupiter rules Sag, squares Virgo and squares Pisces. So Jupiter at the apex of a T-square with Virgo and with Pisces points to our ideas, our beliefs, facing a crisis relative to a learned sense of inferiority, not good enough. I need to be more than what I am. I need to perfect Virgo. I'm inherently lacking in something. Relative to Pisces, this inaccessible ideal of purity and truth that I am so small and far away from. At the core of the insecurity of not knowing is this deep existential fear that I am not worthy of God, that I'm not good enough, that there's something inherently wrong with me. And the confrontation to Jupiter Sagittarius, of course, is that Gemini Mercury, which is, thus, I don't want to review the facts. I don't want to actually stop and look at the map and find out, because then I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I'm not on the path. If I'm not on the path, then I'm lost. The psychology, the energetic state of feeling lost relative to Jupiter it's not a good feeling. Like if we're living in an energy of lostness, that means we're carrying this vibration of I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And it's either going to be one, yeah, I don't know, I just don't know. And we're always going to be looking outside of ourselves. And there can be a learned behavior of not knowing how to source the answers inside, always turning towards divination or towards a teacher, or if there's a lot of Libra, towards another person, or if there's a lot of Capricorn, towards your authority figures, right? Or if you have Jupiter connected to Gemini, you'll be turning towards books or knowledge or whatever it might be. Or you can sensually gratify yourself and distract yourself to feel grounded and secure if you have a lot of Taurus connected with your Sagittarius Jupiter. Right? So either we're just constantly in this restless, I don't know, and trying to find something outside of ourselves to give us direction, or other side of the coin, we're so afraid of not knowing, we're so needing to hold on that we're just going to convince ourselves in our rightness. And we won't allow ourselves to create more space to learn and grow and discover. And I want to return to this chart here to really flesh out sort of how difficult it is with the Jupiter archetype to get beyond belief and really find out what's true, which I'm going to be developing a lot more here. So this is a yod. There's 150 degrees from Sagittarius to Taurus, and 210 or 150 go this direction between Sagittarius and Cancer. So Sagittarius at the apex of the yod is at the apex of a Taurus and Cancer yod reality. Again, Gemini would be the trigger point at the other end. Yods in general are a really great way to understand the archetypes. And for anyone studying, looking at the natural aspect relationship between the various signs, like, Sagittarius squares Virgo and so forth, these are ways of actually unpacking and finding different angles to understand the true nature of these archetypes. So to understand Jupiter, you can analyze a natural yod relationship, two quincunxes, two inconjuncts, between Sagittarius and Taurus, Sagittarius and Cancer. What do both Cancer and Taurus represent? They're both about home in some way or another. They're both about security in some way or another. Taurus is about ground, stabilization. I know where everything is. I know where to find what I need to depend upon to survive. I know how to take care of myself. I know how to find my food, water, shelter. I have a body. I know how to care for my body, take care of my body. Very personal, very intimate, very subjective, and very earthy. Cancer is emotional security. I know how to nurture and create self-intimacy for myself, to care for my own delicateness, my own vulnerability, my own humanness. I know where my home is, literally and energetically. how to create safety, to emotionally integrate and rest and nourish and feel loved and invited and cared for where I am. In Cancer, we need the continuity of feeling safe and secure. So now you look at Jupiter in Sagittarius, which basically is like, well, now what? What am I going to do today? Am I going to get on a plane? Am I going to teach a class? I'm like, oh, wait, I'm getting married. I totally forgot. Like, it's so freaking mutable. Mutable fire. Fire always goes up. And then mutable is unidirectional. So we have this like perpetual movement energy of fire. It's like, it's rising, it's illuminating, right? But applied through a mutable energy. So it's like all this energy, and it's like, I can theoretically be anywhere doing anything. So you can understand just by looking at this relationship, the inherent challenge within consciousness when it comes to being on this journey, staying open, discovering more of the truth, while not holding on to that very human need for security, stability, and continuity as symbolized by Taurus and Cancer. What this represents is, I don't want to acknowledge that there's more. I want to say, okay, well, maybe there's more, but I know what that more is. I know how it's going to happen. I mean, raise your hands if your life has turned out remotely how you thought it would. No one, I'm not looking, but I'm assuming no one's going to raise your hand. Maybe you are, but most people wouldn't say that their lives have turned out the way it is. Even the most awakened people cannot predict the trajectory of their lives. There's such this intimate journey ongoing for all souls of always realizing more of the truth. And that happens after awakening too. When you wake up to reality, it doesn't mean you know everything. It means you don't need to know everything. It means you're no longer struggling with this present moment. And that's the beginning for a completely new phase of discovery, right? You still realize the truth. Like, I love Adyashanti. He's one of my favorite teachers. And one thing that I love about him is he's been teaching for decades. And in his most recent teachings, I hear him talking about new realizations, greater and deeper applications of the truth that he did not know about. And that's amazing. You have you can awaken and still discover. So this Taurus Cancer polarity, when we really integrate this yod, what it teaches us is you can be fundamentally rooted and grounded in your body on this earth as a human being. You can totally give yourself permission to be right here where you are, content, safe, and secure, and still be a humble disciple of reality, ever discovering and ever learning and realizing deeper and deeper applications and layers of the truth. We can find that if you find any chart with either an inconjunct between Sagittarius and a Taurus or Cancer, or anything in the 9th house, in the 2nd or 4th house, in some way you have that quality of a soul having the imperative to discover, to teach, right, to encapsulate greater apprehension of reality, and to hold a ground within their own self. Okay, so I want to speak now about just the energy of knowledge and direct experience as I'm coming to understand this. Something that Jupiter teaches us is that there are principles of reality. These principles don't call themselves principles, right? The Tao doesn't call itself the Tao. And as Lao Tzu wonderfully said, and thank you for saying it, the Tao that called itself the Tao is not the eternal Tao. Those who say they know do not know. There's something very wise and very deep about that teaching. But there are principles of reality, and those principles only exist relative to the mind that's recognizing them. Its understanding is going to be limited. our ongoing discovery and learning of the truth will continue to unfold as we become more and more available to it. But what we do with Jupiter is we learn how to integrate and apply the principles of truth in more and more moments of our lives. So one of the greatest challenges of spirituality is we can have a moment of spiritual realization or understanding, and then live the rest of our lives as if we don't have any sense of what's up. A great example of that is in our meditation, or if you have a deep retreat experience or medicine experience or a realization in relationship. The path really unfolds when we learn how to apply that in our lives, the principles of the truth. And bringing that into application is where we're drawing upon a deep inner knowing and understanding. For example, one Jupiter example, one principle that we can imagine is if someone's angry and you respond to them with anger, they're not going to change their mind. You're not going to win the argument, and they will probably get more angry. And that reflects this principle of you can't fight fire with fire. Or when you react to violence with violence, you create violence. So we can understand that, but then applying that goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. You can take that so deep and look at your own inner relationship to yourself. Right? If you are not feeling good about yourself, and you respond to not feeling good about yourself by hurting yourself, you're only going to make yourself feel more not good. And I can go on and on and on. All the ways in which we so often get the truth in some places, but not in all places. So in really claiming our knowledge, claiming our understanding, claiming our capacity for direct experience and a direct realization of truth, it means stepping up to actually claim our own wisdom and our ability to apply and integrate what we know right now. There's a teaching from Lao Tzu, which is if something's crooked, let it be bent. To straighten something, let it be bent. What does that mean? To straighten something, let it be bent. Doesn't mean if something's crooked, make it more crooked. It doesn't mean if something's crooked, try to bend it. There's a principle here of letting everything be as it is. How do we apply that one, right? Take that concept to apply that in our lives. Does that mean I never interact? Does that mean I never change anything? Does that mean I never give people feedback? Does that mean I never change myself? Well, no, not necessarily. But the foundation for all of creation is always this present moment. It's always now. And life is always whole and complete right now. And whenever we peer upon anyone or anything, including ourselves, as flawed or imperfect, as something that needs to fix, we're projecting a reality of imperfection on the present moment, which is a false reality. And thus, whatever interaction we have is one rooted in illusion. So if we're seeing something that isn't healthy, that isn't in our perception straight or aligned, this fundamental teaching of letting it be as it is actually opening our heart to say this too. The enlightened state, the true nature of reality is this too. Nothing is exempt from reality. God is not exempt from any place. No place is exempt from the divine. And so, to take that into my own journey, my own example, I have Jupiter, natally, I have Jupiter in the 4th house. And so karmically for me, this speaks to many lifetimes of actually having left behind family. I've talked about this a zillion times, and traveled to monasteries and being a spiritual seeker. But there being an underlying restlessness and quality of the truth can't be here, right? There's something in this domestic 4th house realm where I can't find the truth. So I need to actively leave that and seek somewhere else. So the consciousness that I've been carrying has been not here, but here. Whereas the only thing truth ever says is here. Here. Thus, as a part of my own journey in life, there's an ever unfolding invitation and discovery for me to realize and apply the truth in a more imminent, direct way that includes my emotional experience of being a human being. I have that Yod in my chart inherently because Jupiter in the fourth house combines the Sagittarius and the Cancer archetype. So one of the examples of Cancer and Sagittarius, when you combine it, is always moving, whereas Cancer wants to feel nurtured and safe and secure. So for me to actually open up to the possibility that my path might lead me towards family, that my path might lead me towards a more domestic life, and to not hold that as a less spiritual or a more spiritual, but simply, well, wherever I am, whatever is happening, whatever the path is where the truth is. And the moment we hold a preference and a story about how it has to look, I mean, it's okay to have preferences, but when we have a strong belief and a conviction that it has to be a certain way, if we're not honest with ourselves, that we're basically excluding a whole domain of life, naturally, because life is drawn towards oneness, we will have to look at that. You will have to see the very places within ourselves that we're denying. And so if something is crooked, let it be that way. To straighten something, let it be bent. In facing deeper, unresolved emotional needs inside of me that I've otherwise judged as a distraction to my spirituality, that I've otherwise judged as, well, this takes me away from the clarity that I find when I'm really here by myself in connection to source. By allowing the aspects of my being that want closeness, that have been drawn to build intimacy and trust and family connections, I've been allowing the journey as it naturally wants to be to unfold. This is an important piece. Right? When a flower sprouts from the earth, does it choose when to open up? When you're born, did you choose when to cry? Even more so, when you're 3 years old and your parents said something that hurt you, did you choose to feel the way that you felt in that moment? We often carry this really strong illusion that we're making choices in life and choosing our reality. It's true and it's not true. What's not true about it is fundamentally there's a way of life, there's a way of nature. The flower blossoms when it's time. We blossom when it's time. And what is true is we are the creators of this reality. At the core, we are eternal soul consciousness, consciously manifesting ourselves in this reality. But the sheath that we have over our eyes, we don't see that. And so we oftentimes have this very illusory idea that we can sort of choose what our path is. We can choose what it looks like. We can choose how it goes. I'm going to awaken this way with this practice. My life's going to look this way, and these are the relationships I'm going to be in. It's okay to want these things. But there's a fundamental quality that comes up with the Jupiter archetype where we're on this journey. And it's going to surprise you, especially during these retrograde junctions, especially now with it coming to a closer square with Neptune. All of our convictions and what we've already decided upon, we are going to be surprised time and time and time again when we realize, oh, I guess that's in the program too. The flower blossoms when it's time. Every part of our own being is like that. We're actually just a blade of grass being blown by the wind of spirit. And what we're learning how to do is to understand this. We're learning how to understand the reality of spirit in our lives, the true unfolding of reality, what's actually happening. And when we come into an understanding of that, we can use that understanding, we can apply that understanding in our lives. And that's what direct knowledge is. Direct knowledge is always about this present moment. When we can understand directly, not through a belief, not through something that we can conceive of or write down or explain away or prove, but an actual direct experience, right? It's irrefutable. When the flower opens, there's a direct experience of the sun. Like, there's nothing to refute about that. When we cry, we are directly experiencing whatever is emotionally happening inside of us in that moment. When we breathe, we are directly experiencing ourselves in that very moment. And so often, what sort of like a spray can clouds over the purity and the clarity of this present moment are all these other existing thoughts. And this really brings us to an understanding of interrelationship. Pluto is desire. We don't choose our desires. Right? You can't make them happen. You can't avoid them. They're there. And a part of the work is making them conscious. And we have to give ourselves to that path. We can't always just pray it away. That would be maybe sidestepping. The caterpillar has to live out its caterpillar life. Let what is not straight be bent. Play it out, and it straightens on its own. We embrace our reality and let that unfold. But I bring in Pluto because we will not be able to interpret our reality, Jupiter, relative to whatever unresolved desires are still manifesting within our consciousness. And we're predominantly unconscious of our desire nature, Pluto. And Uranus, our individuated unconscious, we don't remember our total past. We have a limited memory, a selective memory of our past, selecting from the past specific scenes and projecting specific stories upon those scenes. Uranus is our limited memory relative to what we've suppressed about ourselves. When we're no longer suppressing our past, we can see the totality of our soul reality, which is timeless. It goes way far back and it goes way far future. It's not bound by time and space. But we're all, to some degree, some of us less than others, some of us more than others, suppressed in our actual perception of reality. And so we think about our past and we'll have, we'll remember how this person looked at us, maybe what they were wearing, but our selective memory thus yields a very selective and specific interpretation of Jupiter. And Uranus, we have a selective memory. We don't see the totality of where we come from because at the core Pluto, we are not yet ready to integrate a deeper evolutionary directive. We're still working out existing desires. And with Uranus, there's just reality as it is. It's like a scene from the past. It doesn't have a bunch of images or stories or pictures. It's just everything, 360 degrees. It's what is, and what is the entire universe. Like in Uranus world, we have vibration, energy, essence. It's not Saturn. It's not divisions and boundaries. It's pure essence, and that manifests on different scales and octaves of existence throughout time. But what we do is we manifest in fractal through time and space, which reflects our own existing karma, and how we manifest within structure and form as a projection of where we're seeking to resolve and find ourselves through duality. The manifestation of desire itself is what manifests the experience of other or not here, but more or later, time and space. So we manifest within time and space, having these experiences, growing and creating a structured reality to become aware of how our own consciousness is structured and to understand how to work within time and space to unravel our consciousness from time and space as well. And then Jupiter, within all of that, we need to be able to understand all of this stuff. So it's just to understand that the way we're able to apply and integrate and give context and meaning to our lives within time and space ultimately reflects upon the degree to which we're even able to see things clearly as it is, Uranus, which itself reflects deeply upon what we're evolutionarily speaking capable of seeing in the present moment. So when we sit silently and we breathe, and we ask ourselves, what's here? Or something that I often do is I ask, who am I? And to just kind of be spacious for that question. By no means do I attest any significant realization in this regard. But when I sit with that, what comes up is not something I'm able to identify. It's not something that I'm able to give a story to. And the longer I abide in that, the more I find that there's absolutely no context for what's actually happening, that there's no story, that there's no interpretation that I can possibly give to adequately describe what is happening right now. Yet this in terms helps inform and give deeper understanding to reality that I can bring into my life. But if I'm sitting quietly and I'm already like, here's who I am, this is what's up, or I'm just going to do this practice and try it this way. If I'm unconscious about projecting an existing answer or idea of what's up, then I'm only going to experience that. So often in spirituality, we're basically like throwing a bunch of cards in the air and hoping that they land on the table and we have like a straight flush. But when we understand the principles of reality, when we actually become curious about the nature of reality, we'll understand that it's not just like a random, you do something and something happens. We can start to see that we're actively co-creating and participating and applying and integrating our wisdom in life. That's where direct knowledge comes from. Direct understanding, direct experience of the truth. And to me, the foundation of spirituality is that honesty. To say, I want to find out what's true and what's real right now. To be with someone in a relationship, to sit with them and to not have an answer. To not be like, I already know who you are. But to come into it with a genuine curiosity, and even larger, a genuine curiosity of what's happening. What's actually happening right now. I know many souls who live this life where it's very clear. It feels like they're a vessel for spirit. They get quiet and they're told, they're shown, they're guided here, 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 there. The voice inside, the spirit inside. It's not an external voice. There's a native teaching that an elder shared with me once, that the most direct way that Creator speaks through us is directly within, through our own inner knowing, through our own intuition. A more indirect way is through a sign, or a vision, or a dream, because it's still something external being shown to us. But again, when we're standing in the sun, receiving the rays of light, we don't need anything outside of us to tell us this is the sun. Nor do we even need to think of it as a sun, but our experience of light is irrefutable. Relative to the trauma of having a certain idea and belief of what's going on, what's happening, when life seems to be showing us a different direction, eventually with Jupiter, we get to a place, if we allow ourselves to come back to then, well, okay, what is the path? What is my path? You show me, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to know. Imagine having that relationship, that quality of openness, if you're traveling on a journey and you finally decided, okay, I no longer know where I'm going. I'm willing to accept instruction. How beautiful is that? To really genuinely say, I have no clue what's going to happen. Again, paradoxically, interestingly, the most confident and assured and clear people I've ever met also have the most no clue, but not in a frenetic way, not in a confusing way. They're both simultaneously so here, such a solid faith. And one, they don't talk about their beliefs. They don't try to convince other people. They're not worried about being understood or being believed. And two, they don't really know what's going to happen. And yet, they're so here. And if you ask them a question, they might have a really beautiful answer for you as well. Or they might not have anything to say. The energy of sincerity is so beautiful. And when you think about it, nature is sincere. Nature is 100% authentic. That's why Jupiter is associated with honesty and authenticity. Because nature never lies. How could it? It's always what it is. But we lie. So in becoming one with nature, in attuning to nature, in attuning with the Tao, be sincere, be authentic. For many years, I've gone through different phases of maintaining different rigorous discipline practices. And about 3 years ago or so, maybe like 5 years ago actually, I just let go of trying because it was so harsh, the way that I was approaching it. And I'm like, this is not right. I became self-aware enough to realize that there's an underlying guilt and fear. Well, if I don't do this, then I'll have no practice and I'll be ungrounded. I'll have no foundation. What will I do with myself? What unraveled in letting go at that time of daily practice, which I needed to do for myself, was in that permission to not make this is how my life has to look a space for self-care, a completely different orientation to care for myself, human, physical, emotional needs. I was trying to skip to a more meditative state where my journey was actually taking me to a more embodied state. And by acquiescing to that, allowing that for a time, I was then able to naturally, even without even trying, I began dreaming of myself meditating. I began receiving instruction from my guides in my dreams, like without even looking, effortlessly, in a way that felt totally intuitive. I began continuing on a meditative path, but from a completely different foundation. And the way that I began it, about a year and a half ago or so at that time, has evolved to a completely different expression to than what it is right now. So to let something be straight, let it be bent. Because really the only thing that's bent is our mind's perception of it being bent. But the path and how it wants to unfold is so perfectly what it wants to be. We can't judge it. We can't say one thing is better than another thing. It's a very important quality to give to ourselves and to other people. To really look with a lot of compassion at our path in life and say, okay, the quickest, most direct path to God might be this phase of depression and confusion. And to try to take someone away from that would be to actually create more difficulty and alienate them from the gift of their journey unfolding perfectly the way it needs to be. To be authentically depressed is beautiful. To be authentically alienated, to be authentically alone, to authentically say, I'm not going to do what I've been doing and I'm just going to focus on my body. I'm going to focus on integrating these other desires and needs that I've been ignoring. That's beautiful. The energy of authenticity quickens everything because we can say, I'm going to play it out, I'm going to experience it, I'm going to do it. And there's no judgment. God does not judge that. Spirit does not judge that at all. I lived in an ashram for a short time many years ago, like, oh my Gaia, like 16 years ago. I was a young man. And I remember they would like wake up every morning for 5 o'clock morning meditation or something. And I grew up steeped in an Orthodox Jewish culture, and so I've always known what it's like to have this ideal. Like you wake up, they call it Vatikan in Hebrew. It's with the rays of the sun. You wake up really early, and every spiritual practice, every culture really values and honors the potency of energy of chi, and the way that the energy of the day is really conducive to quiet and stillness in those early morning hours. Every tradition has that. It's beautiful. So I've known that, and I've also known how all the rabbis, the authorities, the monks, the teachers, they all want you to get up that early. It's ideal. It's advised. So I knew that in the ashram, and as I've always had, whether it was Judaism or Shiva Satchidananda's ashram, that there's a certain spiritual ideal to aspire to. And when you combine Sagittarius with Capricorn, you have the consensus agreed upon path that is the right way to do it. And that can be valuable. Structure and instruction and discipline, all that can be very valuable, but also the downside can be conformity and thus dishonesty. Conformity is dishonest. If you're consciously conforming and choosing to adopt the attitude of, I consciously want to do what they're doing to try that on, but I'm not going to make myself believe it, that's not necessarily dishonest. But so many people on their spiritual practice, Saturn in the ninth, Jupiter in Capricorn, Jupiter in aspect to Saturn, whatever, Jupiter in the 10th, are trying to fit into something that is an outpicturing of their internalized judgments from some kind of cultural acceptance that they are supposed to fit into. So finally, I started waking up early to join, and none of the young people were there. It was only the monks that were meditating that early, and older people. So I was like definitely the only young person, probably the only person in his 20s that was meditating that early. And one of the monks came to me one day and she said, "God is so happy with you." And I wanted to barf. Because even back then, I knew that was total bullshit. But I also understood where she was coming from. What I saw through in that moment was, really? I don't know, I think sleep might be better for me. I was sincerely questioning whether this was healthy or not. There's a part of me that felt like, okay, good, like all the monks like me. I'm like the favorite now. And meditation's always nice, but I was so tired. And I wasn't convinced that that was my way. Of course, I was not as self-loving and self-permitting as I am now. And so I didn't actually give myself permission back then to really just let myself follow the path that was naturally authentic and rising for me. But I saw through it. I'm like, I don't know if that's true. And putting all those qualities on God, of course, is very much a human projection anyway. So this feels like a good conclusion to my lecture portion of today's class. And I want to invite the space up for questions. And feel free to ask about anything related to this topic. And maybe we can even look at some signatures. But don't just like ask me, what does this thing mean in my chart? I want something authentic and real. And this is true with astrology readings. Like when I do sessions for people, if someone's like, I'm curious, tell me about my chart. What are they actually saying in the present moment? What's happening? They're transmitting the energy of, I'm curious, which is great, but that isn't necessarily going to elicit any kind of medicine. So I always invite people when they work with me in sessions to connect with what's wanting to be seen now. Where is a calling for clarity and understanding? And for all of you who are listening live and also in the recording, I am available for sessions. You can check out my website, arimoshe.com. People keep on asking me, are you doing sessions? I don't know why people think I'm not. So I'm just wanting to let you know I am doing sessions. Click on the sessions link on my website. All right, does anyone want to share anything or ask any questions? Okay, I guess not. So we will close this here. Oh, I see that there is a question here. I like how you were saying that everyone's path, what it is beautiful, specifically when you were talking about people who are depressed and letting that be. Yeah, Wilderness, you want me to unmute you? I'll unmute you and you could ask the question. If you want to talk, Wilderness, you are unmuted.
Oh, hey.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, so I actually got into this conversation a little bit with someone yesterday, and you kind of touched on it, and I'm curious of what you have to say, because this person was saying that they said something about how friends should call other friends out on their bullshit, and when they're like not making good decisions and things like that. And when their perspective is that their friend is not making good decisions or something. And I was like, I don't really do that, like, because I don't think that my experience in that moment is really necessary. Like, I don't need to shit on someone. I don't need to tell someone else that they need to do this or that thing to get out of their depression, or out of, I'm just using that as an example because you brought it up, but like, or to get out of whatever they're experiencing, because I do have that faith and that strong need that like they really need to like be in that space, and that like whatever needs to come out. I mean, obviously I would do my best to be supportive with them in that space and hold space and be there as if they are asking for specific offerings, but like I wouldn't project my own interpretations of what I feel about their experience on them. And
Yeah.
so I've been thinking about that balance. Like, what do you think about that balance of like how we support people versus like I guess like, and this doesn't happen to me very often, so I'm not even sure how to ask it that well, but like if you did feel like you were in a space where telling this person something would be beneficial, you know, it's like when would that ever be, when would that ever make sense, like to tell someone, like, you know, if you like, let's say well, does that make sense? I can try to come up with an example if it doesn't,
I
but if it
understand.
doesn't,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let it be. Okay. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I completely resonate with what you're sharing as well. What comes to me to share is I feel that this is just a part of that journey of gaining a deeper sensitivity to like the totality of this present moment. Like there is really obviously no objective right or wrong or answer for this, but for example, I have friends that I know are very rooted in unconditional love, and they have total permission. They never asked permission, but they have my permission to say whatever they want to say to me anytime. Publicly, privately, it's welcomed. And that's because I'm open to hear it, I'm open to listen to it, I'm grateful for it. And that works for me. And I also feel a trust with them. Whereas if there's an underlying like energy of rejection and judgment, and I mean, I probably still would be appreciative of it to some extent. Maybe I would be hurt a little bit, but so often the people electing themselves to give people advice, whether it's even consensual or not, so often in the energy of the advice is a judgment of you're doing it wrong.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's the energy and that's the sort of dishonesty piece that I'm speaking to here. We often think I'm doing this, like I'm talking to you, I'm doing this thing, but what we're actually doing is how we're in relationship to it is what's actually happening. Like that's like the deeper elephant in the room that we kind of keep on missing. So I feel like when we're really caring about love, then there's no personal agenda, and so often our impulse to criticize or correct people really stems from a deep discontent with our own selves. So yeah, there can be a lot of different pieces to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Thanks for your reflection on that.
Yeah. Marty, you have a question? I'm muting you.
Hi.
Hi, Marty.
Hi, Ari, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Let me get my picture back up there. Let's see. Anyway, I want to thank you for this. This is absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to be watching it many, many times over to get the gist of it. I really appreciate your example of the Jupiter Yod. I think that's fantastic, and how you incorporated the fourth house Cancer, and then the ninth house Sagittarius, and the second house of Taurus. And I have always looked at that Yod. I have always given it the analogy of the horse outside of the gate, and how the ninth house pulls you out of your home, and then somehow get that incorporation of the wild spirit brings you better security, personal security, and bodily security, and physical security, and so on. You made a comment. You said life is drawn toward oneness.
Yeah.
Can you incorporate that in that Jupiter Yod, and how that Jupiter Yod draws us toward oneness? Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me tune into that. Thank you. It's good to see you. I'll start with that premise that life is drawn towards oneness because life is oneness. And so it's never not drawn towards itself. That's just the basic starting point here. That life isn't ever drawn towards two. It's not drawn towards separation. It's not drawn towards division. Like the very impulse of reality is unity. So I keep on finding that on my own journey, that as I deepen in silence and stillness, I become a greater space for even more and more and more and more. That the movement of my own journey, of my own evolution, is to become even more encompassing. And I feel like compassion is a great word for that on a personal level, that we become a greater space to hold and contain more and more of reality within our own self. Whereas on that journey, we hit those places of like, no, not that. That's the other. That's where I'm not. That's who I'm not. That's not me. And it doesn't mean we have to merge and take on everyone's identity, but it's wherever we hold that division, where energetically in that moment, there's an energy of resistance. And then we create a cosmology that doesn't allow for even this to be true. That's where at some point, just by the movement of reality, just like the compassion of the oneness, it doesn't want to exclude any of itself. And that's how much love there is, that nothing wants to be left behind. So even illusion, even fear, even anger, even darkness, even the most shameful places, even that is included in the oneness. And it's like letting everyone come home. So that's the oneness piece, to give that a little more flesh and meat. And when I connect that with the Yod connection, two thoughts come to mind. One is the resistance to expanding our horizons, Jupiter, to understand more reality, is marked by that Yod, which is I'm comfortable here. Taurus and Cancer, I don't want to integrate this within my existing self-concept. So I'm comfortable here, I'm rooted here. I don't want to say yes to this, which means we'll develop all kinds of defense mechanisms. We'll block ourselves, we'll guard ourselves, which itself is fine for a while, so that we don't have to include more of it. But then when we integrate that Yod from this point of view of becoming a greater space for the oneness, we actually become an embodiment of expansion, right? We become an embodiment of realization, ever unfolding. It's like, oh, here I am right here, solid, grounded, stable. And from this space, I am becoming wider to include more of the truth. So I'm not leaving anything behind. I'm stable, I'm grounded, I'm safe, I'm secure. I am integrated in my identity. I feel I'm healthy. I'm not traumatizing myself with new information I'm not able to integrate. I'm at my own pace, and I'm able to breathe with it and say, okay, here too. So I just love that sense of like that Sagittarius energy in the top of the chart, almost being like a triangle of energy that just like you're grounded and you're rooted, but you're not possessing. That's my perspective on that.
Thank you, Ari. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ari. It's Linda.
Hey, Linda.
Yeah. Okay. So what about when you get a thought and you know that it's very much conditioning and it's absolute utter nonsense and it's in your mind and you go, oh God, and you really just want it to go away and it kind of has a hold on you, a grip. So sometimes I kind of push it away and, but maybe that's not such a great thing to do. Would you just let it ride or just let it come to a natural end, or would you actually do something about it? Like it's an untruth, it's a conditioning pattern, it's something that, it's pretty unhealthy. So any comments on that?
Sure. I would say a similar thing, which is I couldn't say like, here's the way to deal with that. And I'm always kind of skeptical of answers that like say one way or the other. Of course, there are a lot of like really great techniques for processing conditioned thoughts and all that kind of stuff, and even like clearing, right? I tend to really appreciate just that basic vibration of how we are in relationship to the thing is what's actually happening. So if we're responding to our thoughts with, oh, I don't like this, or let's get rid of it, or whatever, then we're actually creating that. We're creating the energy of resistance. I personally resonate with, in most cases, letting it be there. And there's actually a subtle shift in our relationship to the thought of, what if I just let it take me over? I just let it be. Because really what we're often running away from is we don't like how it feels. Right? When this energy, because before the thought is a certain existing karmic energetic within us. And the thought is just a way of giving it some sort of flesh where we can control it, so we can hold it, we can work with it. But just letting that energy be there, we stop thinking of it. Like, I'm so stupid. But we just like let ourselves be that, and we don't have to resist it. Or even more so, actually, sometimes I go to sleep. I haven't done this in a while, but it happens. And I'll just repeat to myself, I hate you. I hate you. And what I'm doing is I'm actually like leaning into a deep feeling of self-hatred. I'm not like hurting myself and identifying with the thought in a way of like, oh, you're so stupid, Ari. Da, 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 da. It's more like I'm letting myself just go there. So I'm consciously letting myself experience that negative energy. There's something really deep about that, and that really connects with that let it be crooked. To straighten something, let it be crooked. The moment we become allowing of something, it transforms. And sometimes being allowing of it isn't just being quiet and still. It actually means like giving ourselves to it a little bit, like leaning into it and softening and inviting it into the dance. Like, it's like if the music is playing, we can sit quietly and feel the music, or we can actually let our body move to it. And we might allow energy to move through us. So yeah, that's generally how I like to approach anything negative. There's something about a recent trauma that happened in my own life that was just like, the news was just really difficult for me to integrate. And I fought it for a while. And at a certain point, I just let myself feel the pain, the immense grief and sadness and regret, everything that I was feeling. And just by allowing it, it actually changed my entire life. I found for a whole day and a half, pretty much, I was just like in my bed under my covers, talking to no one. I called a couple friends, but like literally I just like parked somewhere because I'm in my van, and I just stayed in bed for a solid day and a half. And I just had to let myself be there. And this is important. It's really, and this is the yin quality to the spiritual path that we just deny sometimes. We don't really allow ourselves, usually, in this culture especially, to be where we are. Now, this being said, there's also space and value and wisdom in, taking the stance of taking out the metaphorical sword and cutting something out. That can be love too. That itself can also be a gesture of embrace. And in terms of how do we know the difference between the two, it's about the self-honesty, right? It's like the quality of like, if we're embracing an addictive pattern of behavior and it's being self-destructive and we know we don't need to do it, sometimes our evolution is getting to that point where we claim our strength to say, no, I am not doing this. Whereas other times, if it's a deep, yet unrealized, unintegrated vulnerability and wound that is still in our system, if we fight it with violence and aggression, we're actually going to hurt ourselves more. So we have to really be honest and feel into it with ourselves and not have a pre-described answer from the beginning.
Great, that's a great answer. Yes, I'm doing that much more and more. Thanks, Ari Moshe.
You're welcome. All right. So it looks like that is all. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Blessed and joyful journey to you all. Till next time.